Hello, fellow streakers, and welcome to another streaking podcast. Jamie and I are excited to welcome a guest today who we found because he has a 10-year streak. That's right, a 10-year streak that we're going to get into and talk about. He's also an educator. He's been in education for a long time. He is a professor at Oklahoma State University. He graduated from the University of Nebraska, also got a master's degree from Oklahoma State University, is married and has 2 children. Everyone, let's welcome to the show, Simon Ringsmuth. And let's get streaking.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was waiting for something. Hi, Simon. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here, Jeff and Jami. I really appreciate it.
We were so excited to have you. We are so impressed with your 10-year streak. So you call it the Weekly 50. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what your streak is, and kind of how you got started?
Yeah, definitely. So my project is it's a photo blog, and I know in 2022 blogs aren't really that common anymore, but I started it, and I'm keeping that streak alive. It's a photo. Thank you. It's a photo blog I started in March of 2013. After I went to one of those events that corporations and schools put on sometime where they were in a motivational speaker. And this guy named Eric Wall, he had the speech about following your dreams and doing something big. And I left that and I thought, I want to do that. But what can I do? I'm just one guy in a small town, Oklahoma. But I thought, well, I'm a new father. I've got a new camera. I really want to learn how to use my camera so I could take better pictures of my kid and then better pictures in general. So I thought, well, I'm going to start a photo blog where I hold myself accountable for using my camera. And a lot of people get cameras, like the big fancy DSLR cameras, and they use them, and then it kind of sits on their shelf. And I did not want that to happen. I really wanted to force myself to use my camera. And I thought, well, what's something that will make me use my camera more on a regular basis, where I don't have to answer to anyone? I'm not dependent on anyone else. And I thought, well, a photo blog, I'm going to do one photo every week. And keep that going as long as I possibly can so that I continue to use my camera. And here we are almost 10 years later, and I still do the exact same blog, the exact same format, just like I started. And to this day, literally to this very day, it keeps me using my camera on a regular basis. And I continue to learn and grow as a photographer as a result.
So first of all, I just love everything about your story because I love that. Thanks, Jeff. I love that you went to a motivational speaker and you were motivated. You're like, okay, I am motivated. And then I love that you came away from it. Photography isn't part of your profession. This was something that just was. So it's one of those, we talk a lot about these things that we want to do, but there's no level of urgency to them. They're just things that are like, wow, I really want to do this. And motivated by, I'm a new parent and I want to capture the life of my child. And I just invested in this camera that I want to use. And so I love that you innately kind of understood, okay, I've got to have some level of consistency to this. So everything, I love that. So we talk so much about how streaking can be the how to people's what, and your what being, I want to become better at photography. I want to use my camera. And you innately kind of set a streak to be able to do that. I love it. So as you've progressed, now it's been 10 years. What are some things that you've learned from this photography blog?
So I've learned, everything from simple photo techniques, like basic elements of composition. There's a classic photo technique called the rule of thirds. It's one of the first things you learn if you're going to do a photography class, the rule of thirds. But I've learned so much about light and shadow, about different lenses, different focal lengths. Incidentally, the title Weekly 50 refers to the only lens I had for my camera was a 50 millimeter, what they call prime lens, which means it does not zoom in and out, which seems like bizarre to me. Why would you buy a fancy camera when you can't even zoom in and out on the lens? Like that's weird. Even my little pocket camera can zoom in and out.
Can do that, yeah.
And I basically just took a couple friends of mine, took them at their word. Kevin and Ryan, they're photographers, friends of mine, and they said, no, trust me, you want a 50 millimeter lens. It does not zoom in and out. You have to zoom with your feet. And I thought, well, that's weird, but I don't know anything about photography. I'm just going to take a leap and trust them. And they were 100% right. And I've learned why that lens is so special and why non-zooming lenses are so special. But I've also learned about other things. I've branched out into other cameras, other lenses. I've got a whole bag now full of camera gear. And Weekly 50 helps me continue to use these things and learn more about them. Recently, I've gotten into what they call macro photography, where I spent about $700 on a non-zooming lens, but it lets you take pictures of things really, really close. And
Wow.
I had never done that before. And this is the kind of, if you see a magazine where they have like close-ups of wedding rings and stuff like that, or nature magazines like National Geographic, and they show a spider up close. That's macro photography. And I had no idea how to do that. But I thought, well, I'm gonna buy a lens and use Weekly 50 to teach myself macro photography. And I'm probably step 2 out of 100 in terms of actually learning macro photography, but Weekly 50 is my way of keeping myself accountable. And so I've learned a lot about photography, but I've also learned a lot about what it means to keep a streak going and how to have a successful streak, especially one where I've never missed a post. Every week, every Wednesday at 1 a.m., a photo goes live, and I've never missed that. And so I've learned what it takes to set realistic goals, meet those goals, and use those in a broader context as well. I work a lot with educators at Oklahoma State University in my current job about helping them refine their teaching. And one of the things that we emphasize is streaking. If you tell your students you're going to have the assignment graded by Friday, or if you tell your students that they have a weekly assignment, it's due every Friday, and you're going to have it graded by Monday. Well, you're expecting your students to do a streak, but they're now expecting you to do a streak. You have got to have it graded by Monday. And if you don't do that, then the class starts to break down. So there's all sorts of lessons in something like Weekly 50 that can apply on a much broader scale as well. So I've learned an awful lot, in addition to just photo techniques that I've also used in professional photography. When I'm out taking pictures of high school seniors or family photos for clients here in town, I wouldn't be able to do that without Weekly 50. I wouldn't have the knowledge that I need. And I was recently in a photo session where the only reason I was able to get some of the photos I got was because of some stuff I had done on Weekly 50. And then when we were out on location with this high school senior, I was able to take some photos as a direct result of that. So it's been such a huge benefit in so many ways.
Wow, there is so much that I want to unpack with that, because what you just went through is so fantastic. A couple of, I want to go to the question that's been burning in my mind as you've described that, as far as where you've applied it and how you've done. You're starting from your Weekly 50 into other areas also. Specifically regarding the Weekly 50, you mentioned something about posting every week, not necessarily taking a picture every week. And that's a nuance that maybe people wouldn't hear right away, but that was it sounds to me like an important thing that you did to keep the streak alive.
Yeah, it's for sure. So I was a new parent at the time, and I now have 2 kids, and my son is who was an infant at the time. He's now in middle school. It's crazy to think about that, but I
Wow.
realized, like, I know, and you have several kids, so you've been through this many times.
And we can attest that time goes
Fast,
fast.
It
very
really
fast.
does. I once heard it described as the days are long, but the years are short,
Yes.
and that's been true in my case, certainly. So the um, the posting one photo a week, that the idea of time management is where I'm going with all this. I see a lot of photographers, and I'm going to use photography as the context here, but this happens in
Yeah.
a lot of contexts. Like a lot of people take up hobbies, baking and car restoration, like a lot of hobbies. For me, it's photography. So, but this applies broadly, right? It's an observation I've seen broadly. So someone will take up a new hobby, and they will set a goal that maybe is not realistic given the other time constraints that they have going on. And with photography, it's so common for someone to get a new camera or a new iPhone or Android phone that takes great pictures, and they want to go on Instagram and they want to post a picture a day. And there's a whole thing in photography circles called the 365 project, where it's kind of like it sounds. People, the idea is to take a photo every day, and the word is take a photo. And so often it falls off a cliff really quickly. Within a week or two, the attrition rate is enormous on things like that, because you can't maintain that initial level of excitement. It's just not possible.
Right.
But what you can do is set yourself up for success by, in my case, posting a photo a week, not necessarily taking a photo a week. And if you think about something like a sitcom TV show, back when TV shows used to air once a week, on like the Thursday night, the new episode of Friends came out. Well, they didn't record an episode of Friends every week. They would record a whole bunch and then space them out throughout the entire season. And that's how I approach Weekly 50. My goal is to use my blog as a self-improvement tool, as an educational self-improvement tool. And I do that by posting a photo a week. I might not take a photo every week, but I always post one every Wednesday at 1 a.m. And I have that automated scheduled on my WordPress site. And so if there's just stuff going on, like I got COVID a couple weeks ago and I was stuck in my room and feeling really crummy. If we were out of town unexpectedly, things come up, and these things happen. But I've maintained the streak because I've built in a bit of a runway. As we record, as we're recording this, I've already got 4 weeks of photos scheduled and ready to go. But the thing is, I can't stop taking photos. So I have to keep that streak. So even though I've got photos scheduled for the next 4 weeks, I was out yesterday with my camera on campus looking for photo opportunities. And I took a photo that's going to be posted probably 5 weeks from now. So I've built in that slack and float time to allow me to accomplish that goal of 1 photo every week. And if I didn't have that, I promise you, I would not have been able to maintain the streak. There would have certainly been days when I just couldn't do it, or weeks when I just couldn't do it.
You know, the level of intentionality, Jami, that's kind of what I'm looking at, is the level of intentionality is exactly what most of us look past, because there's two intentional things that I see that you've done. Is one, I'm going to see what it is that's within my law number 1 of streaking is make it laughably simple. Yep. And part of that is looking like what you said, Simon, seeing, okay, what for me is possible when I have COVID, when I have things come up that I didn't expect, I'm tired, whatever it is, what is possible or attainable for me in order to keep the streak alive. And 2, I'm going to be very intentional, because on the weeks where I feel great or I have the time, I'm going to actually schedule 2 or 3 more posts in the future. Do you see that, Jami?
Yeah. And I also, it resonated with me when you said it's impossible to keep that initial level of enthusiasm. And that's something that I think is so key, because when you when you're motivated, you want to conquer the world. And so often, the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is that so often when we're starting something new, what inspired us is someone who's a lot further down the road. So what we're looking at is someone who has learned a lot more than we have, has progressed a lot farther than we are, and we're starting someplace else, but that motivation is to be where they are. I want to be that good. I want to be doing what they're doing. And so you have that initial, I'm going to be amazing, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to learn it quick, and it's going to be awesome. And then you're right, you fizzle, because the start of something new it's a little bit daunting sometimes, and it can be discouraging because we're not as good as what was motivating to us to do it. And so I think it's so amazing. And again, I've spoken to this before when we were talking earlier. It always speaks to me that when you inherently understood how to do this, it speaks to me to the truth of streaking, that the philosophy and the methodology, that starting with something laughably simple, looking at your real life, not your just, I'm so motivated life right now.
So true.
Is great to be able to say, okay, I've seen that there's a huge attrition rate for this other one. What can I do? What's going to actually be something that I can maintain and keep going with this? And
Yeah,
okay.
that was so important for me initially. I didn't want to be a statistic. 80% of blogs fail within the first 18 months. And today it's probably even more. That statistic is a couple of years old. I didn't want to be in that 80%. And before Weekly 50, I'd actually had a movie review blog that I started in 2009. Me and some friends wrote movie reviews. We kept that blog going for about 4, maybe 5 years, but we didn't have some sort of regular schedule. And so it was sort of ad hoc, and we didn't make money off it. And I also don't make money off Weekly 50. I've never made anything off it. I spend my own money to keep the site going. But that's not my motivation. My motivation isn't make money. It'd be nice, but that's not what's keeping me going.
I wouldn't turn down, but
yeah, if Nikon wanted to buy me out, we can talk. But my motivation is to learn, not to make money, and that makes a huge difference for me for keeping that photo blog going. Is what's my main goal here? And if my main goal is making money, then that's going to drive the decisions that I make about keeping my streak alive. But if my main goal is self-improvement and education, that's going to take me on a slightly different path. And that's one of the most important things that I learned is I kind of have like a 5-step program for making.
Yeah, talk to us about that, because I was curious about that, because I know that from this you've developed quite a bit. I mean, there's some ancillary benefits that you've talked about, but talk to us about the 5 steps that you because you share this with students, and you share it in speaking and everything else, and we'd love to let our listeners know what that is.
Sure, thank you. And these are just things that I've developed myself, but I believe there's a huge amount of overlap in what you talk about with Streakin as well. So I'm not going to pretend that I invented any of this. I'll give credit to you all and others. But
I don't think we invented as much as we just uncovered truth.
Yeah, it's like an archaeological dig.
Yep.
You uncover stuff, you brush it off, and you show it to everyone else.
Yep.
So my first step, anytime you're going to take on some sort of endeavor that you want to be a streak, is define your purpose. Know what your purpose is, and then stick to that. So if you're going to do a blog, if you're going to start a podcast, and that's another one. I heard it said, I don't know where I heard this or read this, but when I was growing up, what kids used to say is, "Hey man, let's start a band."
Yeah.
Today, what kids say is, "Hey, let's start a podcast."
Yeah, that's great.
That is so true.
So whether you're doing a blog, a podcast, a personal project, you have to know why you're doing it. Are you doing it for money? Are you doing it for likes? Are you doing it so that it will lead to other opportunities? Are you doing it just for self-improvement? Like, what is your goal? And then once you have that goal, then focus on that goal. So for me, Weekly 50, the goal all along was I want to learn more about photography. My goal wasn't I want to make money. I want 1,000 subscribers. I want 1 million likes. My goal was intrinsic. I want to learn about photography. I want to be a better photographer. And once you have your goal, then step 2 is define your method. So my goal wasn't start a photo blog. My goal was I want to learn to be a better photographer.
Can I riff in here?
Yeah. Riff away.
I think this is so profound, because you've said it several times. This is who I wanted to be, which is different than this is what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. After you understood who you wanted to be, then you looked at it and said, well, what do I need to do to become that person?
Yeah.
And we talk so much about that, because it's exactly what you're saying, that's the foundation that's going to keep you going, because you're looking at it saying, and you said it, I wanted to be a better photographer. That was, and so you clearly defined, this is the person I want to be. And then after that, you looked at it and said, okay, if this is who I want to be, now what do I need to do? And I think sometimes we get those backwards, and we focus on the do instead of looking at it and saying, no, this is about me becoming the person I want to be. Less about all of the things I'm going to do and accomplish and the prestige that might come with that, and more about exactly what you said, the intrinsic motivation of this is who I want to be. So that was great. Thank you.
I really appreciate you saying that, Jami. And in photography circles, it's really common to do something like, I'll just use the example earlier, a 365 project. So in that instance, you're putting the method before the purpose. So if someone says, I want to take a photo every day. I want to do a 365 photo project. That's a method. But what's the goal? Is the goal just to have that notch on your belt, or is the goal some sort of self-improvement goal? And what we find is that with a lot of people who start those types of projects or any type of endeavor that they want to streak at, if the method comes before the purpose, then we lose that motivation to continue.
So true.
And if we put the purpose first, in this case, I want to learn to be a better photographer, then I can look at my method. And we talked about that initial rush of excitement. If you're going to do, let's say, a 365 project, you might not have the time and the ability, especially if you have kids and job and everything else, you might not be able to accomplish it. And so as soon as you start failing at that method, then you feel like you failed at your streak. You failed as a person. You're not a good photographer. You know what I'm talking about?
And then you give up on the whole thing and miss out on, because as I'm talking to you, I look at it and I think this streak has brought you 10 years of different things that you've learned, different things that you've enjoyed. And I can only imagine hundreds of pictures that you can look back on that are associated with things that you've learned and memories that you've made.
Yes.
And had you started out too ambitiously or for the wrong intents and purposes, you would have missed out on all of that. You wouldn't have any of that.
Absolutely. And I have felt that feeling many times where I look and I think, man, I'm just a failure at my photography because I didn't meet this goal this unrealistic goal that I set for myself. And I see that on other platforms. On social media, people will chase likes. And that's actually one reason I do a blog instead of, I'm not on social media with Weekly 50. And I tried it for a little while. And I found that I would post a photo on Instagram that I was really proud of, that I worked really hard at, and I thought was really good. And it would get like 3 or 4 likes. And then someone else would post a photo of their breakfast and get like hundreds of likes, just a snapshot of their bacon. And so then I started to compare myself. Well, I'm not getting any likes. I must not be a good photographer. Like this is it's not good. And so it's because my methods and my purpose, my purpose and my methods weren't in alignment. When I was trying to do Weekly 50 on social media, I was chasing the likes, and I didn't intend for it, but I found myself being more obsessed with how many likes I can get in a photo than am I growing as a photographer. And when I started to do that mental comparison where someone else got more likes or more comments than me, now I'm doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So it all had to come back to, why am I doing this? And then once I do that, then my method is not social media or YouTube, although I am on YouTube, but my purpose isn't get likes and get views. My purpose is intrinsic, help me grow.
Yeah. So number one was, what's your purpose? What is it that you want to do? Number two then method? Is that
method?
what you're?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what's number 3?
Number 3 is set a realistic goal. And the key is realistic. You can't, you can do whatever you want.
you have that freedom.
But your probability of success is dependent upon certain things.
Yes.
That's exactly right. For me, I thought, well, daily is too much. I can't do daily. Monthly, though, is not enough. I need to be doing, if I want to grow as a photographer, I got to be using my camera more than just taking one picture a month or posting one picture a month. So I thought, well, weekly or bi-weekly, I can do that. That's a realistic goal. And at first it was too constraining. I was so excited about my camera. I'm taking pictures all the time. And I wanted to put like 10 pictures a day on my blog. And it was really frustrating. Like, oh man, I want to put a picture now. I don't want to wait till next Wednesday. But really quickly that gave way to all the other things that started happening in life. So the fact that it was a realistic, achievable goal is that that is what led to this 10-year streak.
Yeah,
And you
that's
have to
beautiful.
set that up front, where if you set an unrealistic goal, as soon as you start to not meet that goal, then other dominoes start to fall. So
Yeah.
uh, that's step three, is define your purpose, figure out your method for accomplishing that purpose, and then define a goal for your streak,
Okay.
whatever that streak may be.
Great. Excellent. Just a little riff in here because I love it, what one of the things that you were saying that I really appreciate is the idea that the goal and streakers, this is one of the areas where we talk quite a bit a lot as far as definition of terms. One of the areas that we talk about, a goal is a destination. It's something that you can either achieve or fail. It's going to be one or the other. Whereas a streak, you keep it going toward your certain objective, to what you were saying, toward my purpose. And what I love that you said that I love to highlight is you can make things easy or hard in two ways. One, in the time frame that you set. So for example, you said daily was too intense of a time frame. That was going to be way intense, and and so I'm going to go weekly. So setting the time frame, especially for a streak, I'm going to do this at least one time weekly. That then gives you the opportunity to make it laughably simple. Because if it's too intense, I'm going to take 10 photos a day and post them. That just sets yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
So that's number one, is time frame is how you can simplify what it is that you're doing. The second thing that I look at is the number in that you take, the activity. So for example, you said we've got 10 I'm going to take 10 photos and I want to post them all. you know, whereas what you really, you took a step back and from your motivation and said, okay, I'm going to post at least one a week. That's doable. That's something I could do. So both of those things, either time frame or activity, or both of them together, because some people may look at it and say, well, you know, one a week is even too hard for me, so I may do one a month.
Yeah.
But that's adjusting the time frame. Or you look at it as activity and saying, I'm going to do 5 a week. Oh, but that's too much. I'm going to back that off to 1 a week. And that's what I appreciate about what you started to look and see, is that to make this laughably simple, I have to look at not only time frame, but also amount of activity, and then be able to plan it in.
Yeah, that for sure, and especially with, yeah, your audience runs the gamut. There's professionals, there's parents, there's people of all ages and walks of life who are doing different types of streaks. And what you said is so important about the time frame, because everyone has, we all have 24 hours in every day, but we spend it differently, and we all have different constraints on our time.
Yeah.
And if we want to be successful at a streak, we have to make sure that what we're doing, the activities, meet the available time that we have.
You bet.
Right.
All right. So number 4, what do you got? Number 4.
And this actually touches on something you mentioned, Jeff. I'm going to just build on that a little bit, is define your success criteria. So what are you chasing? And this goes back to your purpose. So if my purpose was, I want to learn and grow as a photographer, what's my success criteria? So is there one particular thing I want to accomplish? Is there like something that I'm working towards, or is it more ethereal? And for me, I don't actually have an end point in mind, because like you said, a goal is about reaching an end point. For me,
Yeah.
this is a streak, and there is no end point. I'm about improving myself as a photographer. And there's a distinction to be made, especially if a streak involves something public like on the internet, because there's so many ways that people judge success. People like to chase numbers. People like to chase views. If you're going to be a YouTuber, a lot of people judge success on YouTube by how many views they get. And are you chasing views? Are you chasing likes? Are you chasing comments? So do you want a lot of comments on your Instagram or your YouTube or whatever it is? Are you chasing dollars? Or is your success more subjective, more personal in nature? And for me, for Weekly 50, my success criteria had nothing to do with numbers, likes, comments, or dollars. It's all personal. And if I was chasing those, then what happens when I meet one of those? And I did this for like the first year or so. I really wanted 100 subscribers to my blog. And I thought, if I can just get 100 subscribers, then I'm going to feel happy and fulfilled. Well, we know what happens. Like, you get that 100 and then you're like, man, if only I had 200 subscribers.
Yeah, or you start looking around and you're like, that person has 1,000.
Yes.
Exactly. And you're all of a sudden, yeah.
Exactly. So my success had nothing to do with numbers and what other people were doing for their success. So my success in my head, like, I don't know how many subscribers I have on my blog. I don't know how many views my videos get. Is it 5? I don't care. It's for me. I'm doing this for me so that I can learn and grow as a photographer. And I also I have a few people who comment every week. They'll leave a comment about a photo. And so I want to engage with them as well. Like, I don't want to leave my audience out in the cold, because that's part of just a good blogging etiquette in general. But my success criteria is not, I don't have a defined endpoint. My success is always that moving target of, I want to learn and grow as a photographer.
That's really good.
Thank you.
As I look at that, you're mentioning about comparisons, and this phrase went through my head. Comparison is the killer of creativity and any type of streak.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
If I start to compare myself, that's immediate quashing of anything that I want to continue forward with. Don't you think?
Yeah, totally. Just throw in the towel the minute you start comparing.
I absolutely agree. And and step 5 is
give us 5. Yeah. What's 5?
Step 5, be consistent. And that's all that is to it. And whatever you do, you gotta maintain that consistency. And one reason that I want to do a blog is because it is public in nature, and having a public audience does help me maintain that consistency, because a very small part of me doesn't want to let down my audience.
Right.
Even though I don't know how many is it 10 people? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? I don't know, but I don't want to let them down. So I have this implicit agreement with whoever does read my blog that, you're going to get something from this. I'm doing this publicly, because I could just do a Microsoft Word file on my computer, right, and put a picture in a Word document and make it private. But part of what's helping me maintain my consistency is that public nature, and knowing that there are people out there who are waiting for my photo every Wednesday. And there's one guy, D Welker, if you're out there, D, he follows me on YouTube, and YouTube is exactly the same as my blog. There's no difference in content. But every week he posts a comment, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to let D down. That photo. So whatever it is that you're doing with your streak, just find a way to maintain consistency. Otherwise, it's just, and this is you talk about laughably simple. Like, this is what you talk about all the time, is just like finding a way to be consistent at your streak.
Yeah.
Right. I remember when we talked to you before we got on the podcast, and one of the things that we talk about when you have a streak that happens over time, because it takes a little bit of time, is that there's this ancillary benefit of self-confidence. And it's usually associated with law number 3, which is law number 2, which is no record, no streak. And because when you have a record of something that you've been doing, you start to have a level of confidence. And I remember when we first talked, you said, I have a weekly 50. I've posted on my blog every week. And then you said, I have never missed a week. And we talk about the difference between people who are able to say, oh, I've almost done it. I may have missed 1 or 2, and they leave it with a question mark, versus someone who says, I haven't missed a week. And it's great. That is one of the things, as we've talked with you, that I've noticed, is this level of self-confidence that you have in the fact that you're like, I have kept this commitment to myself. I have posted every week. I may not feel that the quality of what I did was equal across the weeks, but I can say with complete confidence and with a total exclamation point that I have done this every week. And that is one of the things that I loved as we talked, is again recognizing that there is this level of self-confidence and just knowing that you've kept that commitment with yourself and that you have a record to show it. You because I remember you even said you can go back and look, I haven't missed a week. and
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think is so important, is that inherent in your streak is this ability to keep a record, that you know every time you've done it, every week you've kept that streak alive.
Yeah, and that's certainly been really important for me, is to have that record. And it honestly, it is a source of pride. Maybe is too strong, but I'm proud of it. Like
Right, yeah.
Should
I am
be.
proud of the fact that I have done this. And I posted about about Weekly 50 on the site Reddit. There's a photography forum on Reddit. I think 6.5 years ago, I made a comment about, someone asked about photos, and I said, well, I've got my photo blog, and it's called Weekly 50. And 2 days ago, someone responded to my comment from 6.5 years ago.
Wow.
And they said, it was very short, and it was something to the effect of, man, you're still going, keep it up, bro.
Yes.
That is so great.
It's inspiring to people when someone has kept, you're like, wow, that is amazing.
Yeah. So that public record, like no record, no streak, that's really that's so important for me as a photographer, to continue with this streak. And it's like you've mentioned in everything you do, that's one of the foundational principles of any streak, is you have to have that public record, or that you have to have a record.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shows. Yes.
So
I also appreciate what you said regarding your community, D, who's out there, right? Making a comment every week. One of what we've discovered, and you highlighted this, and I wanted to bring it out, is that the community is about celebration.
Yep.
And just like that individual on Reddit that said, you're still going, keep it up. There is such an innate celebration, and also living through what someone else's streak is. I mean, through your streak, through the Weekly 50, there's so many people who live through that. And so being able to have your community comment and say, Simon, thank you so much, or comment on the photo, or a comment on something, and celebrate with you this weekly accomplishment, it is absolutely fantastic. Before we're talking about how comparison is the killer of creativity. Well, I'll tell you, celebration is the absolute augmentation of creativity, because when people start to celebrate together, that's now when I get motivated and excited, and I celebrate with you and you celebrate with me. It's one of the reasons why on the Streaking app, as people look at and go through the community on the Streaking app, it's a place of celebration. People celebrate each other's streaks all the time. And that's what I see with what you're doing, Simon, is this opportunity to have a community of photographers, most likely, or the people who are following your site, that are celebrating what it is you're doing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That it's nice that it's totally apolitical. There's nothing, it's just all about photography, and no one brings any of their anything beyond that scope into whatever they're commenting on the site. And so I've really gotten burnt out on a lot of the online social networks and other communities like that in the past several years, because it seems like it's toxic in nature.
Yeah.
But on Weekly 50, none of that happens. It's just, and it's just people talking about photos, asking questions, celebrating this. I don't want to say my success, but their success too, because I have people. There's one woman, Rebecca. She teaches a photography class at a local community college, and she talks about that on some of her comments on my blog as well. And it's about celebrating that. And then so I'll encourage her, and I'll say, yeah, great job. And I'm sure your students are loving what you're doing. And so it's this communal celebration of this ongoing streak, without any of the other stuff that can
Yeah.
come to bear on some social platforms. It's been really nice.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's so good.
We are just a couple of things left in our last few minutes here. First of all, just recently, or your post this week, I was watching, and it was about something that your child brought home, and this reminded me of. So, how has your streak impacted your family and your professional life? Both those two.
So one thing that happens with a lot of photographer projects is there's this rush of inspiration about the world is my oyster, everything looks like an amazing photo opportunity, but then quickly people start to rely on the old standbys, photos of food and photos of their kids. And I don't
Food
I
and kids.
Food and
Those are the
kids.
standbys.
There's the standbys.
Okay.
I love
Yes.
it.
and and I specifically avoid ever posting pictures of my kids on Weekly 50. Sometimes I'll put some non-identifiable picture, like a silhouette standing against a lake or something. But this is not a place for me to share photos of my kids. The goal is for me to grow and learn as a photographer.
Mm.
And I I want to that's just a personal thing. If other people want to do it, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to tell anyone they should or shouldn't do whatever works for them. But for me, it's not. I didn't approach Weekly 50 to say I know what'll help me is if I can post pictures of my kids publicly. So instead, though, what I've found is that the effect that this has had on my family and my profession is I take way better photos of my kids because of Weekly 50.
That is awesome.
Yes.
Nobody sees them except me and my wife and our friends and family. But when I'm looking at a photo, like when I'm looking at my kids or doing something, I now am paying attention to what's the aperture of my lens, what's my shutter speed, do I need a low ISO, and how do I get that? Where's the light coming from? So if he's by the table eating breakfast, well, I need to move myself around so that I don't use the flash on my camera, so I can get natural light. If I want to try a technique called panning that I learned on Weekly 50 by trying it out, which is where you see this in race cars, where the race car is totally clear, but the background is super blurry because they're going 500 miles an hour. Anyone can do that, but it's a technique called panning. You don't need special equipment to do that, but you do have to learn how to do it. So I learned how to do that by taking photos on Weekly 50 and posting on Weekly 50. And then my kids are riding their bikes, and now I'm like, sweet, I can do this. I have cool pictures of my kids because I taught myself using my blog as like the proving ground. So the pictures of my kids then don't go on my blog, but they're better as a result. So that I'm taking way better pictures of my kids and my wife and the people in my life than I ever did before. And in terms of my profession, that's more of just the mindset, the streaking mindset. So if I need to schedule a meeting with someone, a recurring meeting, we try and find times that we can that will work for everyone for the entire semester, not just what'll work for next week, and then we'll figure out the week after that. Like, how can we set ourselves up for success if we're planning a long-term project that's going to require a degree of streaking or long-term commitment. So it's affected other things in these ancillary ways, but the core of it about learning to be a better photographer, that just continues to this day. And I think I hope I'm still doing this in 20, 30 years, because I don't see an end point for me in terms of photography. There's always something more to learn, and that's one of the joys of doing this blog.
I know as a wife or as a child that I would appreciate looking better in the photos. So your kids are probably, and the other thing I've heard is that if your kids have all these photos to go through of the things that happened in their life, it's supposed to also really improve your memory. Like, I bet that they'll remember things better because you have pictures of those things. And so it becomes a part of their history, and we're not relying on our own memories, which are so terrible.
And that's one thing that I have also learned on Weekly 50 is the specifically writing about that photo imprints it in my mind. And I can go back to, and I've tried this. I can go just pick a random photo from 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I remember everything about that photo because I wrote a, a mini essay about that photo. And I also record my, so every photo has an audio recording, which is not me reading the words. It's me sitting down separately from the words and just riffing on the photo. And that the act of doing that helps sear this in my mind, and that gives me things to think about with my kids as well. Like you're right, Jamie, having that photo record does help me remember things that I wouldn't otherwise remember.
Yeah.
But it also, the weekly 50 has taught me that if I really want to cement something in my mind, writing something about it or explaining something about it also helps make that more permanent in my mind.
That permanency. The other thing that I noticed that you had mentioned earlier is that you were walking along campus looking for opportunities for that weekly 50. That is something that we've noticed that happens as you've been in a streak for a while. You go from, oh, I want to do this, to seriously looking in regular things that you're doing throughout the day to be able to find opportunities to fulfill that streak, which I think is so great because it's again, you're intentionally looking for opportunities, which means I think you're catching more opportunities because you've taught yourself, which I think is a really hard thing to do initially, to teach yourself to be looking, because life gets busy and we're, focusing on other things. But because of that level of consistency that you've had, you've been able to have it where you're like, this is kind of a part of my life. It's a part of who I am. And therefore, going throughout my regular life, I'm also looking for these opportunities. I'm looking at life differently, almost through, not to be cliche, but through a different lens.
No,
you're looking at it through a 50 millimeter.
Nicely done.
Thanks.
That's a great, I love that, Jamie. You're exactly right about that. And if someone is doing, let's say, an exercise or a streak involving like running, like I want to run 2 miles a day. If you're not in your natural environment, like let's say you go on vacation and you're not at home with your usual streets that you run on, people who are serious about running will look for those opportunities, and they will say, you know what, I'm in Malibu this weekend, not in Nebraska, my normal spot. So I'm looking around though. Where can I continue my streak?
Yes.
Yep. So,
and I love that you say that, because Jeff and I have run, and that's been one of the things that I've recognized with running, is that I have grown to appreciate running in different places has helped me to remember visiting those places even more, because I remember being like, oh, remember we did this run in that one place. Yep. And so it's true. It's totally true. You look for those opportunities. And I think as people have streaks, that happens more and more. That's part of what I feel so passionately about, is that the beginning, when you set a streak, a huge part of what you're doing is just teaching yourself to remember it, teaching yourself that, this is important to me, and I'm going to keep doing it. When that initial burst of momentum goes, it takes a little while to be like, okay, I am going to do this. I am going to do this. And then you get over this hump of, I need to do this, to when am I going to do it? And you start looking and seeing the opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with everything you just said.
Well, Simon, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And just on the side note here, Jamie and I, our run or walk at least 1 mile, 6 days every week, is at 395 weeks. So 395 weeks old. That's about 7 years. So we're getting close to where you're at.
We're not at 10 years.
We're not at 10 years, but we're walking down that path. Pun completely intended.
Pun complete. Of course. Sometimes we're running, sometimes we're walking.
Yeah, but we're heading down that way. Simon, for people to follow you on your weekly 50, it's www.weekly50fifty.com. Is that right?
That's correct. And if you like to use YouTube, the exact same content is on YouTube, because some people prefer it that way. It's just go to YouTube and search for Weekly 50. You'll find it.
Yeah. And Streakers, I'd highly recommend going out to his website and subscribing to it. It's absolutely wonderful. There are so many great things that Simon shares with us in his years of learning. It's completely worth it. And so go out and subscribe there. Also, we're going to convince Simon in one way or another to get on the Streaking app and to start posting in our Streaking community. We're gonna find a way to make that happen, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to get him to post one or two
of his
awesome
pictures
shots of his kids.
of his kids.
I think I could be convinced.
He could be convinced. That's awesome. Well, Streakers, as always, you can always reach out to Jami or I. I'm at Jeffrey, Jefffery, at streakingmastery.com, or
Jami at JAMI at streakingmastery.com.
Also, feel free to follow us on any of the social media sites that are out there, but most significantly is the social media app, which is Streaking. The Streaking app has it, and you know, it's interesting because we were talking about this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this next week, but how social media and streaking come together in the sense that you follow people who have your same activities, the same things that you're doing. Just like Simon is a photographer, and people who want to talk about photographer talk with him. We're going to talk also with about others who do a similar thing where we're grouped together by activity, which is all about joining the Streaking community. So we look forward to that. Simon, again, thank you so much for being with us, and everyone else,
keep streaking.
A better you.